So I'm back, and we're going to talk about one of the most important elements of health, which is food and food security. And actually, for this this portion, we have some visual aids and some sort of photos of what we're all talking about. So first, I want to start with you, with Chris. And Chris, tell me a little bit about Hustlers to Harvesters, and kind of tell me a little bit about what it is, and walk us through some of these photos that we're seeing.
Well, yeah, so my name is Chris Bradshaw. I run Dreaming Out Loud. We're a nonprofit social enterprise in DC. The photos that you see are of our partners, Hustlers to Harvesters, or two social entrepreneurs, folks that are from one of the communities that we work in. For those who don't know, in Washington, DC, in Ward 7 and Ward 8, two wards where there are more than 95% African Americans, there's only 3 grocery stores for more than 170,000 people. And so recently, we've launched a 2-acre farm and food hub called The Farm at Kelly Miller. And Hustlers and Harvesters have been central partners in that endeavor. They're both from Clay Terrace, which is one of the public housing communities that's very near to the farm and food hub. Both of them are returning citizens. Bo did 13 years straight, Wallace did 22 years straight. Incarcerated, but over the course of that period, they acquired many skills that are applicable in terms of liberating their own community and shaping a new future for that neighborhood. The farm that we are working on together is located behind Lincoln Heights and Kelly Miller Middle School, and you find that, you know, being from that community, these men being from that community, they know everyone who's connected to that community. They know the parents of the kids who were in school, maybe their grandparents, their aunts, their uncles. So it's a much different proposition, quote unquote, going into a neighborhood when you're building from the ground up, grassroots up, with folks from the neighborhood versus implementing something that seems like a project of someone else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and kind of pivoting a little bit to Baltimore with you, Holly. Tell us a little bit about so this is a map of food priority areas. What is a food priority area, and how is it different from a food desert?
Sure. So in collaboration with Johns Hopkins Center for Livable Future, we've issued this map. And this map is really a tool to drive policy and policy agendas. So the way that it was formerly called a food desert, and in January 2015, we released these new maps, and all we did was change the name, but not the definition. So the definition is really looking at 4 key factors: low income, healthy food availability, which is very unique, which most definitions do not include. So with Hopkins research, they went to every food retail establishment in the city, and they gave a healthy food availability score. So if there's areas in red, it could be showing a ton of unhealthy food from corner stores, convenience stores, in addition to a distance to the supermarket. So those are 3 of the factors, and then also vehicle availability. So we know that to address these issues, there's not one solution. You have to look at transportation. You have to look at income. You have to look at what's available in the stores and how much it costs. And there's many factors included in that. So that's why we have this. But we also know that a citywide map isn't enough, right? That we're a city of neighborhoods. So we have 14 council districts and 14 council district maps. And now we have resident food equity advisors who help drive those policies.
And so I guess, should everyone be saying food priority area instead of food desert, or is that just a you thing?
So we changed the name very intentionally, so residents can call it and name it what they would like. As a city, we want to be able to put our policies in place so that changes happen.
Yeah.
And so we talked with many residents and our resident food equity advisors and decided to change the name from food deserts because it's not natural. It is intentional in some ways of structural racism in our food system. And so we want to be able to shift that. And in order to shift it, we have to be able to call it what it needs to be called. So from a government angle, healthy food priority area, that's where we as city are going to be working together to make those changes, along with our Food Policy Action Coalition and our resident food equity advisors.
Yeah. Well, and so one element of this food system and in getting food to areas that need it is, of course, the church. And so I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about the Black Church. What is the Black Church Food Security Network? So got it. Okay. Yeah. So what is it and how does it work?
So the Black Church Food Security Network is an organization that came together to try to solve these food access, food inequity, lack of a voice and agency into what people are putting into their bodies.
Yeah.
So if you look at the map that was previously up, so whether it's food desert or healthy food priority areas, there's an increasing contingency within the community that's calling it a food apartheid to illuminate the political portion of it. So what we tried to do is say, okay, what assets do we have? Because by and large, the people who are affected by this are African Americans. So we said, okay, what assets do we have within the African American community that can help address this problem? And one of the assets that we have are churches. There's churches everywhere. Each of those churches have land. So how can we utilize the church land to create fresh produce and then make that fresh produce available to people who are already coming to the churches for various reasons during various times of the week?
Yeah. So do you grow the food on the church property, or how does that work?
So it's a multifold approach. So we're growing food on church property, and then we're making that food available. We are partnering with farms in Baltimore City, North Carolina, and getting eggs and chickens and large-scale produce available to the churches as well.
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of people here already understand, but help those of us who don't, why is it important to do it through the church, and kind of what is the role of the church in doing that? Yeah.
Well, the church has been there forever.
Yeah.
The church is not going anywhere. So whether there's a grant or a program, or whether the name of the lack of food access changes, the church is always going to be there.
Yeah.
So if we want to have it sustainable, then we need to use the most sustainable source. And frankly, churches within the Black community are the largest landholders in the Black community. It's the largest institutional landholders in the Black community. So.
I was hoping you guys could talk about sort of how your approaches are different from like what you think of as charity. So I think some people, when they think of as providing food, it's like food can, donate the cans and do a food drive. How is what you're working on different from that, and maybe more sustainable?
Yeah, I would say, first off, we are a social enterprise, so we do produce food that we sell, but we're a food hub as well, so we aggregate from farmers across the region that we've been connected to, whether that's first-generation Mexican-American farmers, African-American farmers, what have you, and distribute that food to other food-related businesses to generate revenue, and also use it as a training ground for community members. So we have a workforce development program. That program, it recruits folks from those communities right in and around the farm, and then helps to place them in other food-related businesses so that we can create economic opportunity. In addition to that, we have an entrepreneurship program where we find community-based entrepreneurs and work to utilize underutilized spaces like a commercial kitchen in a church or a community center, so that folks can begin to produce their own food-related products, drawing upon that heritage foods and those things that you think of when you your chow and those things that you might have eaten at the church and you never thought of it as a business. We want to spark that creativity and also train folks and give them the skills and access to resources to take that into something they can pass along to their children and generate a living wage from. But I also think it's critical to point out that we had this conversation in our staff meeting the other day about the notion of an escape hatch. Zachary, one of our team members, was really upset at the notion of these escape hatches that we look to when we're afraid to really address the systemic and structural issues that have intentionally constructed the circumstances around communities. And for us, that means challenging the power structure and the dynamics around housing, around our who has access to capital, and having those conversations and changing the narrative about why the circumstances are what they are.
Yeah. Because it's really hard to access startup funds, right? If you're fresh out of prison, that can be really difficult. So this is sort of an opportunity to build a business regardless of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hustlers to Harvesters, we're incubating them as a social enterprise. Bo's a carpenter. Yeah. So, they're going to be building raised beds in people's yards, building sheds, building fences. They have a variety of skills and talents that can be applied as they work with other returning citizens and pull them into this new economy.
And Dariel, how does it work on your end? Do people, is it like the attendees of the church can get like a CSA share when they come for services, or how does the food actually usually get distributed?
We have farmers markets at the churches.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So we haven't had any CSAs. Maybe that's something we do in the future, but to date we've had markets at the churches, generally during after some type of regular meeting. So it may be Bible study or a worship service on Sunday, and then people are asked to participate in buying produce afterwards. So our model is not charity at all.
Okay.
We're trying to empower, and we do that through selling of produce, but then we also do that through workshops and skills training and dialogues around how we got here and then what we can do to resolve our issue.
Do you guys take SNAP at the farmers markets?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. Actually, we did. Actually, when we first started, we had a farmer from the Eastern Shore, and she came over. She had SNAP, and she had a credit card that we did in partnership with the local Baltimore organization. So we've done it.
Yeah.
The last market we had, I don't believe we had it, but
Yeah.
that's something that we'll probably have in the future.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, and speaking of SNAP, Holly, I wanted to turn to you for some of the innovations you've been doing around food stamps and getting them to be applied at a wider variety of retailers. Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. So from the food policy angle, SNAP food stamps, and just so you know, it's in the Senate right now in committee, the Farm Bill. So SNAP is very much being debated at this moment in time. But one of the things, we talked to the grocery stores, and we wanted to find out, like, what are their biggest challenges? And one of the things they said is that SNAP was really dispersed only 10 days. So everyone was there within a 14-day period, and then no one was there for the rest of the month. So we worked with the state, and we changed it from 10 days to 20 days. So that would make it easier for the retailers. And also, lines are less for the residents and so forth. And so that was implemented 2 years ago. So that's one policy change on SNAP. Another one is just making sure that it's readily available. So our farmers markets now have SNAP. The large ones definitely have SNAP with double incentive dollars. And so another piece is really providing technical assistance to our retailers. The process for SNAP is difficult with the retailer requirements, and they keep changing, and they're getting stricter. They're only in English. And we have primarily a Korean retailer community here, and so how to support our retailers, because the majority of our residents in the city, over half, are on SNAP. So over 80% of our stores are on SNAP, and we don't want them to lose any of their SNAP benefits. So we want to support that.
Yeah. So it's interesting, both of you mentioned some of the structural reasons why the food environment is not as healthy in a lot of places in Baltimore as it is maybe in wealthier areas. And I kind of write about that in the article, about how often fast food is disproportionately marketed to people of color, and that there are a lot of fast food places kind of intentionally in urban environments. I was wondering, do either of you have an opinion on whether there should be stricter kind of zoning requirements or any kind of crackdown on fast food retailers? Yeah. Yeah. Ding, ding.
Yeah. Certainly. I mean, so in addition to food deserts, healthy food poverty areas, we also have a thing called food swamps.
Yeah.
Which are the areas that are inundated with unhealthy food options. So if you come to the neighborhood where I pastor, there's dozens and scores of unhealthy outlets, no regular healthy outlets. So what are you expecting people to eat? How long do you expect the people to live when all their options for food are unhealthy, are breaking down the body literally? Yeah. And those things don't happen by happenstance, right? Those are intentional actions. So maybe there should be regulations that says, in this area, this given area, there can only be so many food outlets or so many ones that are unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I think there's a number of creative options around incentives as well as taxation that could maybe find an innovative way to tax these types of stores and put it into a fund for access for entrepreneurs or for healthy food retail. I know that's controversial. People have their different ways of looking at those ideas, but at the end of the day, I don't think that individual efforts can do the job by themselves. Policy has to come into play. I think one of the things that we'll be taking a look at on the DC Food Policy Council, which I have the privilege of serving on, is what might those look like and how can we do it in an equitable way and make sure that the right folks didn't access whatever comes out of it.
Yeah.
So I need to speak to this as well. So we have the Resident Food Equity Advisors, 14 residents who were selected through a very competitive process, 80 applicants for 14 slots, each representing the council districts. And they just put their recommendations to the Baltimore Food Policy Initiative last week, exactly on this, on small food retail recommendations to the city to consider. That includes zoning and licensing and density, and also how to help these businesses thrive with selling healthy food. Because the majority of these businesses are also minorities and also small scale. We don't have a lot of fast food restaurants in Baltimore, meaning McDonald's. We have a ton of carryouts. We have a ton of convenience stores, corner stores.
Yeah.
So our policy agenda has to look a little different because it's small business.
Right.
So that is really what the Resident Equity Advisors this next year is a full policy agenda on how to address these issues.
Why is it so hard to get like sweet green into Sandtown?
So,
no, tell us. No, I seriously, like, tell the audience, yeah.
Well, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, whoever wants to.
But I did
Go
meet
for
with
it.
Sweet Green about, and I also shared with them your farm. You may not know this, but last year I mentioned to Sweet Greens when I was meeting with them in DC and saying, oh, there's a great farmer, a Strength of Love too, that would be a perfect supplier. So I think that maybe there's still opportunity because I think they are looking.
Yeah.
I mean, that's supply chain. I can't. So anyway, the supply chain could really be coming from Baltimore farms since we do have Sweet Greens here in Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, so we do have a juicing business that juices and does quite well in Sandtown area.
That's awesome.
But when people have been conditioned to eat fried chicken for 3 meals a day for 20, 30 plus years, to then drop a Sweet Greens in the middle of it and expect that people are going to now start eating salads is not, it's not
rational,
realistic.
Yeah.
It's not realistic, right? So there has to be something, we have to start reconditioning people to enjoy greens, to enjoy salads. And right now that doesn't look appetizing because that's how people have been conditioned to think.
Yeah. I would say that Sweet Green has a role to play. I'm not sure if it's dropping a store down in some of these areas. We're partners with Sweet Green. So they're helping us to purchase a refrigerated truck and do some work on the infrastructure at the farm and food hub that we're developing. And we're really excited about that in terms of developing that supply chain. The grocery infrastructure within neighborhoods has been decimated. It's been specifically targeted. And so reestablishing that and giving folks the agency and capacity to be able to manage that at a community level, I think could be really impactful and powerful in a way that you could actually grow a Sweet Green out of the communities. I think it's really critical for us to recognize that the talents are there in the community, and we just need to figure out what we need to do in terms of helping folks access those resources and raise it up from the ground level.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take audience questions in a minute, so be thinking of your questions. But first, Holly, I want to ask you a little bit more about Baltamarket and some of the virtual supermarkets and other things that you've done in order to improve actually people, let's say the groceries are out there, but actually people being able to get the groceries into their house.
Sure, so that's run by the health department.
Yeah.
And there's two key things to understand about Baltamarket with the virtual supermarket. It's in senior disabled centers, housing facilities, and the residents order online, and then once a week, ShopRite comes and delivers. And so it's really to be able to get the grocery store to residents. But what's really important here, and that's throughout the city, I think there's 13 or 14 sites, but what's most important is this program pushed up against a federal policy and said, well, this could be so much more if we had online SNAP benefits, which we did not. And so this program was instrumental. So now we do have online SNAP benefits in the Farm Bill from 2014. And we're in pilot phase, and Baltimore is a pilot city with 3 key retailers that should be launching next year so that the virtual supermarket that is right now programmatic only in certain housing sites could go throughout the city. So that's a really good example of how a community-based program can push a policy.
Yeah. Do you guys have questions?
Can you hear me? I'm back here.
Okay, hi.
Yes, hello. Good morning, everybody. I'm Darren Brownlee from the Department of Medicine at Johns Hopkins. You talk about different opportunities to further attack some of those unhealthy chains or restaurants, but I wonder if there are also opportunities to decrease the price for vegan restaurants, vegetarian type of meals, locations, Whole Foods, as I mentioned earlier, which is not only difficult to get to, but can be more expensive than buying a McChicken at McDonald's or anything of that nature. You made a really good point of really conditioning or unconditioning the mind to say, okay, I can get this fried chicken for very cheap, but how do we then attack the more healthy food to ensure that we have access, but also that it's in a reasonable price range for those who want to live a healthier life?
So that's $1 million question. So I think that there are short-term solutions that we're already starting to put in place that we would like to expand with double incentive dollars. So if you spend, we see it at the farmer's market, but it hasn't really pushed into retail yet in Baltimore. So at the farmer's market, you can spend $5 on SNAP and then get $5 more for produce. Well, I would like to be able, to look at how do we bring that into retail? How do we bring it into the corner and convenience stores so they too can have that incentive? And also in the grocery store. So that's one component to it. That's not the full answer, but that's a programmatic solution. That's a short term.
Yeah, I would also say, one thing that's very important, incentives can work, but we also have to think about the farmers and the folks that produce the food. If we want it to be cheap, somebody's going to take a haircut, and it always seems to be the farmer. And if we want small farms to be able to be sustainable and stop losing farms and having, massive farmer suicides like we see these days, that we have to be accountable to that side of the coin as well. I'll end it there.
If I could just say a quick word, I mean, the farm bill was mentioned earlier, and the reason why fried chicken or cheeseburgers or any type of meat is it's cheaper oftentimes than the salad is because those they're subsidized.
Yeah.
They're subsidized, right? So then I think on the federal level we have to start asking, should we not either reverse some of those subsidies that are given to meat producers or add subsidies that are given to vegetable producers to make it competitive?
Yeah, we need a full cost accounting of what the damage is of those cheap foods. If you added on the $4,000 of healthcare costs and those other costs to that hamburger, an apple would look cheaper.
Right.
And also in this farm bill, what's being debated right now in committee in the Senate has local urban agriculture in the farm bill currently. I mean, it's 9:30, I don't know what time it is right now, but it's being discussed. But this is the first time we're seeing urban ag as a part of the farm bill. We always think of farm bill, the agriculture's in the rural, the food stamps in the city. That's not the case at all. And starting to change, well, there's lots of SNAP and food stamps in the rural, and there's also a lot of growing in the urban.
Yeah.
And so that's what's really up for debate right now in the Senate.
Hi, I'm Damon Davis. I used to be at the Department of Health and Human Services. I actually have two questions. One, I'm going to start with you, Holly, and if you could just say a little bit about the map that you put up before and the cross-section of the food priority areas, and I noticed major parks was on the maps as well.
Yes.
And then the second question, and I should have started with, I admire everything that all three of you are doing. I wonder if you gentlemen could talk a little bit about how you're incorporating youth into the programs that you have instituted, because obviously one of the things we want to do is institutionalize the things that we are trying to change, and therefore bringing the youth along with the older folks who are coming back to the community or who are really invested in the church and its longevity. How do we continue those programs? Thanks.
So I need clarity on the question. Is it the relationship between priority areas and parks?
Yes.
So one of the questions that this map, one of the assets to this map is it's where residents live. And I think we've done a solid job of demonstrating where residents live. So you can see that none of the parks are actually red, very intentionally, because it's not where people live. Where the maps, but it doesn't necessarily show all the retail because we want to show where the impact is. And so with the parks, what we are seeing is the intersection with farmers markets. Druid Hill Park is a perfect example. From 6 years ago, we got a farmers market at Druid Hill. Another area that we see in our parks is our rec centers, right? Our rec centers are instrumental in our summer meal programs and our after school and serving youth healthy food. And we've also changed our procurement policies so that our summer meals are serving healthy meals. And Alice Kennedy today has been one of the key leaders who will be talking later on her role with that as well.
Yeah, so the Blackshirts Food Security Network, it was started by 3 people, but it's led by Dr. Reverend Heber Brown, and he has 2 passions. One is food systems and food equity, and then the other is child education. So he runs a school called Arita's Cross that is run out of his congregation throughout the summer, and then through all the vacation days throughout the school year. So within that school, food equity, the food systems, all the work that we're doing is core to that curriculum. And children get to come out to the farm and get their hands dirty and ask all the critical questions and see the impacts.
Yeah. Connecting the 2 questions, I think parks are very important. The Farm and Food Hub at Kelly Miller is located on on Department of Parks and Recreation land. It's situated behind Lincoln Heights, which is one of the largest public housing communities in the city, and Kelly Miller Middle School, which we're very fortunate to have there as well, because we can connect youth and seniors in intergenerational programming. We're not taking on this project alone. Hustlers or Harvesters is a partner. We work with several other organizations who focus on those specific populations and work intentionally to bring them together. We have a food corps service member that works inside the school who is teaching nutrition education, restarting the school garden, and integrating lessons about African American heritage foodways into the curriculum and into the school day to day, which plays a part in not only the education side, not only the nutrition side, but the community cohesion side. It's critical to recognize the cultures which folks come from. In DC, a lot of folks come from the South, right? Everybody's grandmother's from North Carolina or South Carolina, right? You're used to sitting on the porch and breaking those snap peas, right? So we want to bring that back. The youth need that. Many of them haven't seen that cohesion. They don't know what it looks like. So we have to repaint this picture for them. Food is an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that's our time. But thank you so much, Chris, Darielle, and Holly. This has been so interesting. Thank you for being here.